It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is What Made the Cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Doug Smith brings you this portion of the program. An incredible selection of Kia, Subaru, Chevy, Jeep, Dodge, or Ram, and now the Mitsubishi brand is in the family of the dealerships in American Fork, Spanish Fork, and in Linden. Nobody knows cars like Doug. Joining us on the program right now, he covers college football for Yahoo Sports, Nick Bromberg. Nick, thanks for being with us, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We were just talking about the plethora of all the conference championship games across the board. What's the one that kind of bends your ear the most? I'm going to make you pick on for a Friday for tonight's games and also for tomorrow.
Okay, so I got to go with Tulane and North Texas tonight. And it's also too just the fact that we are guaranteed to now have a 12-team playoff. We're going to have two teams with basically new coaches. Obviously, Ole Miss has already promoted Pete Golding. He's going to be coaching. But then whoever wins this game is going to have a coach that's leaving for a bigger job, whether it's Tulane's John Summerall or North Texas' Eric Morris. And I am very intrigued the fact that North Texas is a slight road favorite here. Tulane's hosting because they were the ranked team last week. And so North Texas is one bad quarter away from South Florida from an undefeated season. So I'm really fascinated to see them against Tulane. And then tomorrow, I'm torn because chaos theory, I want to talk about the ACC game because of just what a Duke win, does
Oh my
to this.
gosh. Yeah.
And it stinks because it's the same time as what's probably going to end up being our Heisman decider.
Yeah.
Because that to me is what's is unfortunate about that game is, we can throw the playoff implications out the window. We know that whoever loses is going to be on the opposite side of the bracket, whether it's the 2 seed or the 3 seed. I don't know if it really ultimately would matter. But, you look at it and there's going to be there's thousands of Heisman voters. And there's going to be so many people who watch this game and are torn between Julian Sayin and Fernando Mendoza. I'm a voter. I'm right. I'm torn. And so I'm sitting here going, what if a guy has a tipped interception? You can't hold that against him. It's like, you really have to sit there and watch this and say, okay, is this going to really be my tie-breaking game here and go with the winning quarterback for the Heisman Trophy?
Nick, I'm also a Heisman Trophy voter, so I'm with you on that. I'm going to be watching that very closely. And I know we have to be careful about what we say about the voting and where we lie.
I'll say it for you guys. Jacob Rodriguez for Heisman. It's fine. You guys can say it. It's
but
fine.
I want to get your take because it feels like the most wide open Heisman race in quite a while. It's the last few there's been like at most 2 or 3 guys. You're like those are the guys. This year feels pretty wide open. Like you could make a case for a number of guys. Do you remember it being this wide open, or is that how you see it, or do you feel differently about that?
No, I was looking back at some Heisman stuff earlier this week, and I was very surprised a couple years ago how close it turned out in 2023 with Jaden Daniels over Michael Penix.
Yeah.
I thought Jaden Daniels was the clear runaway winner that year, and I voted for him. And I think, let's just take our votes out of this, and let's look at the betting odds. You've got 3 guys that are 2 to 1 or better to win the Heisman Trophy, and I think that speaks to the point of just this parity here. And so we know it's going to be likely one of Sayin, Mendoza, or Diego Pavia, and I think the Pavia wrinkle is kind of interesting here because, the reports this week that Vanderbilt was exploring, quote-unquote, a 13th game. And obviously, Utah would have had to be one of those opponents if they could have gotten somebody to play.
It would have been amazing.
It would have been very fun. And, the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? That's not necessarily a game for the committee because I think the committee would sit there and say, we're ignoring this. You're doing this on your own volition.
Yeah, this is a rogue basement gambling operation.
We did not
need
authorize this.
Exactly. It'd be like, hey, we have nothing to do with this. We're not counting it. But I think it's the Heisman game for Diego Pavia because he's at such a disadvantage here not playing a 13th game with the 2 guys he's up against, where that would, to me, had the bigger impact of you can sway some people if Pavia goes out and, has 400 total yards again against a top 15 opponent if you could figure out someone to play. So you're right. I think there's a clear top 3, and I'm also really, really intrigued as to who ends up getting the additional invitations to New York City because they've been doing 5 for a few years now. I'm assuming Jeremiah Love is going to be the 4th, and then after that, Jeremiah Smith. Is it Jacob Rodriguez? That to me is really intriguing as to who the 2 people on the margin is going to be.
Well, with all these games that are on the docket, we, of course, here locally have our eyes firmly planted in Arlington on that BYU-Texas Tech game because also chaos theory could kick in if BYU is able to get an upset over Texas Tech. Having watched the first go-around, I don't think people are giving BYU a lot of a shot in this one. the added bonus of both of these coaches being extended this week and both of them going to stay long-term at the schools that they're at, I think is good for the Big 12. What's that game look like, and how does BYU get a possible upset over Texas Tech? Because I think that's the only way that maybe two Big 12 teams gets in.
I absolutely think you're correct, and I'm sure you guys have delved into this for weeks on end. It's just a matter of, to me, we can talk about Notre Dame and Miami all we want, but why is an 11-1 BYU team at 11 and not maybe 8 or 9? Yeah. And I think that kind of changes the whole way we're talking about the college football playoff right now. And but I think the biggest question is for me for Texas Tech, and it has huge ramifications for BYU's running game. We saw in Lubbock about a month ago, BYU could not get the run game going consistently. If David Bailey is not fully healthy, he got banged up. They said, we think he's going to be good to go, but he missed the second half of that West Virginia game as a precaution. If this is something we don't truly know about and he's not at 100%, that can be the opportunity then for BYU, I think, to move some bodies up front and potentially, establish the run, do what they could not do in road environment. Although I will say it, with it being a sellout this week, I think it's going to be pretty much another road environment for the Cougars. I understand there'll be a lot of BYU fans there, but with it being so close to a Texas Tech alumni hub, I think there'll be a lot more red and black. So, we've seen Bear has not been intimidated by road environments. I think seeing an opponent for a second time is really going to help. And so, you look at it, I think the spread for a lot of people goes, oh, wow, this is going to be a Texas Tech walkover. And I'm not too convinced. I think I'd pick Texas Tech, but I'm not going to be surprised in the slightest if we're going to the fourth quarter and this is a one-score game.
Yeah, obviously Texas Tech's a juggernaut. They're a top 4 team in the country, and they're a machine right now. But I don't think people understand how banged up BYU was in that game. A 10 a.m. start in Lubbock on the road.
Absolutely.
All those things, people aren't factoring that in. I think this is going to be a much different do I think the BYU is going to beat Texas Tech? I'm not sure, but I don't think it's going to be a blowout. But looking at BYU, you kind of alluded to that when you're talking about it. You can imagine how frustrated people here are about the College Football Playoff Committee and the way they're handling BYU. BYU is number 6 in strength of record. Are you frustrated by the way the committee's looked at this, and what's your opinion and take on how BYU has been handled and how all the rankings have been sorted at this point and the explanations being given?
I think the Big 12 title game has been the crutch for BYU's ranking. It's the easy excuse to say, well, if they win the Big 12 title game, they're in. Well, yeah, sure. But, we saw this last year where you had an undefeated BYU team that probably could have been 2-3 spots higher up in the rankings and nobody would have batted an eye when the rankings first came out those first few weeks. And, you look at this and say, not only does I think BYU need to win this game, obviously, to make the college football playoff, but a win here plays well next year and the year after that and the year after that, where when you're in a similar situation to where if we're going to turn this, I'm not going to sit here and say BYU is not going to perennially be in this situation, because I think there's every possibility in the world that this is a top 20 team on a regular basis, to where we'll find ourselves back in a situation again next year in 2026 that BYU wins this game. They're now going to get that respect, and maybe they're not number 11, they're number 7, they're number 8. And I think the frustrating thing to me, and I do want to give Hunter Yurachek a little bit of grace on this, in that, he was thrown into the role of committee chair. He was not expected to do this. This is only like his second or third week doing it.
Yeah, but you don't need to sound like a total dope at this point. Come on.
Thank you. That gets exactly to my point of, like, you're talking about how Auburn is a tough place to play, where they went 0-4 at home in the SEC. They played Vanderbilt tough at home. No, that game was in Nashville. And why are we giving Alabama credit for a 17-0 lead over Auburn when Notre Dame had a 28-0 lead before Stanford scored? And that's a rivalry game. Notre Dame-Stanford, absolutely a rivalry, even though Stanford's 4-8, Auburn's 5-7. And to me, it looks like what they're doing here, I think the simplest way to explain it, and the committee could never say this publicly, you swap Notre Dame and Alabama because you are giving yourself the excuse to where if Alabama goes out tomorrow and loses 27-20, 24-21, something within that one-score margin, they lose to Georgia, you can drop Alabama to 10, still keep them in the college football playoff, assuming, of course, that Texas Tech beats BYU. BYU beats Texas Tech. This scenario is thrown out the window. BYU's in, and whoever's at number 10 is out. But, you're looking at a situation where you can say Alabama drops one spot to number 10. We ding them for the conference championship loss, but we don't drop them out of the playoff. And the byproduct of that, too, is it moves Notre Dame back up one more spot to avoid any potential Alabama-Oklahoma rematch at 8-9, and Notre Dame is now no longer up right next to Miami. If BYU loses, they're obviously going to drop down. Miami would jump to 11. You would not have number 10 Notre Dame, number 11 Miami next to each other with the Miami head-to-head win in week 2 looming large.
It's such an awkward year, and it's interesting because BYU was on the edge last year, and they felt slighted because they beat
SMU in their
beat
building.
SMU,
had the same resume, same record,
and
exactly.
And everybody looked, and then afterward, we all kind of went, oh, maybe they should have gotten a little bit more of a nod. And then you go, well, this year if you're 11-1, then they won't keep you out.
Oh,
and then you have what you have, and I think that it just takes. I think just to your point too is that it just takes a little bit extra. You've got to build that brand over a longer term. That's for the Big 12 and for these individual schools as well. I grew up in the state of Texas, and it still takes a minute for people to wrap their head around Texas Tech being a power and rather than just a one-off. It needs to be a long-term situation, and I think they could pull it off. I think BYU needs to be like that. Of course, here in the Salt Lake area, they want Utah to be the same way, and they certainly have the potential to be that, and they have that branding of winning a couple of Pac-12 championships. That makes a difference. People think about you more when you have those types of resumes. And so I think that it does take, to your point, a lot more of just kind of winning going forward to make it happen as well.
Well, no, and I agree with the Texas Tech point. I mean, I'll fully say I'm biased. Half my side of the family, all Texas Tech grads. So I've been watching Texas Tech football my entire life. But,
wow.
You look at Georgia and Texas Tech, what Texas Tech is doing to Big 12 opponents and what Georgia has some really good wins in the SEC, don't get me wrong. But if the resumes are flipped, again, Texas Tech's probably the number 3 team, or just blind test. Texas Tech has a real good case to be the 3 team and not Georgia right now. So you look at it from that perspective, and we were going to the committee. We were supposed to take all this stuff out, and clearly we've gotten to the point where these ranking shows are doing way more harm than good because we never get a consistent opinion. But then we're also never going to get rid of these ranking shows because it's content for ESPN, and it's something for us to be talking about like we are right now every week because they did it. It's like the following the March Madness plan, I think would be fantastic. Give us one with 2 or 3 weeks to go in the season, and then give us the final one and leave us all guessing. But we know that's never going to happen.
Before we cut you loose, I'd love to get your thoughts on this Big 12 championship game. How do you see it coming out? What's going to be the key for either team to get this win and with so much on the line on Saturday?
I don't think Texas Tech can get away with kicking field goals again. I think they've got to score touchdowns. You cannot count on BYU only putting up 7 points. I think BYU gets to 20. That's the danger zone for Texas Tech if they're kicking field goals once again. And also, too, I think the floor is higher for BYU. As you said, BYU was really banged up in this game, and you can't count on the special teams mistakes happening like they did earlier in that game, where just absolutely just sent the boulder running down the hill, and you knew it was over from there. Avoid the special teams mistakes. I think something like 31-24, maybe even 31-27. I think ultimately Texas Tech does win this game, but it's not going to be the landslide it was a month ago.
Nick Bromberg, he covers college football for Yahoo Sports. Appreciate the breakdowns from the Nashville perspective, Nick, and we're looking forward to this one, and we'll have you on again, man, at some point. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Nick.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go.